An attack line. Attack Tim Walz. One of the attack lines is, he let Minneapolis burn to the ground. He handled the George Floyd protests terribly. He incited or allowed or permitted violence and looting and burning and arson. There's a little problem with this, though, which is that we now have audio of failed former President Donald Trump praising Tim Walz, saying he's very happy with how Tim Walz handled the George Floyd protests. This is so critical because anytime now they come up with this, he let crime run rampant in Minneapolis. Trump said he did a good job. Trump himself said, I'm happy with how he did it. The audio isn't perfect here, but you can hear what's being said. Here's Trump confirming Tim Walz did a good job managing the George Floyd protest.
I know Governor Walz was on the phone and we spoke, and I fully agree with the way he handled it the last couple of days. I asked him to do that.
I totally agree with how he handled it. I asked him to do it.
The world was laughing. 3 days later, I spoke to the governor. The governor's, I think, on the call, and he's an excellent guy. You've got
excellent guy.
A big National Guard out there that's ready to come in and fight like hell. I tell you, the best, what they did in Minneapolis was incredible. They went in and dominated.
Listen to this. Now, whether you like the idea of police dominating protesters, that's a different question. But the point here is Trump is acknowledging Tim Walz did a good job. The police did a good job by his standards. And yet now one of the talking points they've come up with, because they don't really have anything to criticize Tim Walz with, one of the talking points they've come up with is he did a terrible job handling the George Floyd protest in Minneapolis. Whatever your belief is about how it was handled and how it should have been handled, Trump said it was done perfectly.
And it happened immediately. Tim is on the phone now. Tim Walz. Again, I was very happy with the last couple of days, Tim. You called up big numbers, and the big numbers knocked them out so fast it was like bowling pins.
Our city is grieving and in pain. And I would just say, as far as the potential, the peaceful protesters who are expressing an outrage that is real. They witnessed 8 minutes of a man dying in front of them. Well, at that point in time, I did something unprecedented. I mobilized the entire Minnesota National Guard, and that's what the president was alluding to with the size of the force was capable. But I think, again, Mr. President, you asked on explaining this, I would just say, it's going to be very difficult. There are bad actors in this, but there is such a legitimate anger. Our real dilemma.
So look at that. Look at that on this phone call. And by the way, the fact that these phone calls always happen with speakerphone, everyone's on speakerphone. There's reverberation. There's echo. If everybody could just put on a proper headset mic for these phone calls, we would have such better audio recordings. But that's a story for a different day. Tim Walz both being praised by Trump for his handling and also saying, by the way, the protesters have reason to be upset. The protesters are grieving what happened to George Floyd at the hands of police. And also, I am handling it in the best way I can and keeping Minneapolis safe and intact, and Trump praising him for it. So you have to understand, with all of these attacks, it's because they have nothing. And we'll get to this later, but Tim Walz bailed on military service because he knew he was going to get deployed to Iraq. People who served with Tim Walz said, we didn't know we were getting deployed months later, that our unit would be deployed. There were rumors, as there always are, but that's it. That one's not true. Tim Walz allowed Minneapolis to burn to the ground. He did a terrible job. We have audio of Trump saying you did a great job and you did exactly what I wanted you to do. The reason this is happening is the criticisms don't actually align with reality, and they don't have substance with which to attack Kamala Harris's vice presidential pick, which is a sign that he's a pretty good pick. Item number 3 is the DUI arrest from 1995. And we're going to get to all of that. But remember this audio every time they go with, he did a terrible job with the protests. Trump certainly seemed to think he did a good job. Now, let me prepare you for their defense, because you know how it always works. We find something that seems irrefutable. This is game over, right? They bring up the protests and we go, Trump said he did a good job. Here is how they are going to rebut this. They will say, the date of that phone call that I just played for you was before Tim Walz let Minneapolis get out of control and burn to the ground. That's how they're going to get out of it. They always have a way to get out of it. And it's going to be by saying Tim Walz may well have been doing a good job up until the date of this call, but then he was no longer doing a good job. Of course, then now we're in the weeds and we rebut it by saying the reaction in Minneapolis to the protests did not change before and after this phone call. But by this point, you've lost them, right? The point is be prepared for them to back up to that, to say Trump was right as of that date, but then it went downhill. It just happens not to be the truth. Let me know your thoughts about the attack lines we are seeing on Tim Walz. And by the way, for someone in Trump and MAGA who believe that your vice presidential pick doesn't make a difference, they're expending a lot of effort, energy, and resources in attacking Tim Walz. So they must suspect that he does help Kamala Harris. Let me know your thoughts. info@davidpakman.com. I've been tracking my family tree for a long time now, and the service I've always relied on is MyHeritage, which I started using long before they became a sponsor. Trusted by over 90 million users, MyHeritage makes it easy and fun to build your family tree with a range of powerful genealogy tools at your fingertips. One of my favorite features lets you quickly find new family members and add entire new branches to your tree. It's always a good time to sit down with my family, show them what I found. For example, the other day, I found a scan of an immigration document from when my mother's uncle's aunt arrived at Ellis Island, or this document from the US-Canada border for my relative who was born in 1895. This is remarkable stuff and really interesting artifacts that are part of the puzzle of my family's past. MyHeritage gives you access to over 19 billion records like this, making it easier than ever for you to uncover amazing new pieces of your family's history. You can try MyHeritage completely free for 14 days when you go to davidpakman.com/myheritage. The link is in the description.